Introduce her, I meant. And I want to say thank you all for coming out here, and good luck of your first year of teaching. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I could actually feel the expression on my mother's face when I called her from UVA one Tuesday afternoon to tell her that I had applied to and been accepted into Teach for America. It was a mix of shock, confusion, and deep skepticism. "But Jen, you hate kids," she said to me. "Why would you want to spend 2 years of your life surrounded by them?" "I know," I replied, getting defensive, "but it's not about being around kids. It's about the mission to end educational inequity," I said, realizing I sounded like a TFA textbook. "I'm not doing this because I like kids. I'm doing this because I believe in the mission and want to be a part of it." I could hear my mom's earring graze the plastic of her cell phone as she shook her head. "I'm gonna do it," I continued. "Hey, at least I won't be moving back home after school to mooch up y'all as I pretend to look for a job, right?" Mom couldn't help but like that idea, so she agreed to drop the subject as long as I agreed to think long and hard about my short temper, lack of patience, and general dislike for peekaboo, playing make-believe, and Dr. Seuss before diving into the rabbit hole. When Kira called me one evening to introduce herself as my TTL and answer any questions I had about getting ready to come down to Jacksonville, she had no idea that I had been sitting by my phone waiting for over an hour with a typed list of questions I was dying to ask. My list went something like this. What the heck is induction? What the heck is institute? What is the difference between induction and an institute? What is lesson planning? I keep reading about this lesson planning, but I didn't even know lesson planning was a verb. What does that even mean? And finally, can we wear open-toed shoes at institute? Needless to say, I had absolutely no clue what to expect, and even less of an idea what I was getting myself into. So my survival tip number 1, expect and roll with the unexpected. Looking back, the best way I can describe Institute is an overwhelming, exhausting, intense, and exciting TFA boot camp. I quickly became indoctrinated by the same TFA core values, ideals, and high expectations I now understand we must hold for our students. For 6 weeks, I had no idea what I was doing or even what I was supposed to be doing. For the first time in my life, I was failing miserably at something I was actually trying very hard to accomplish. This was emotionally devastating, and if it had not been for the other Jacksonville core members and the members of my teaching group at my school, I darn well might have given up. So survival tip number 2, don't try to do this alone. Even though I for sure did not give up, I walked away from my 6 weeks at Institute thinking that those students I taught would have been much better served playing Halo than sitting in my classroom. 2 weeks ago, I received the following email from Gregory Salette, a sweet little 3rd grade boy I taught for my 6 weeks at Institute. Dear Miss Feigert, I just wanted you to know that you were a great teacher. You made summer school not as hard for me. I passed my reading portion of the CRCT this year and came close on my math. My mom is getting me a tutor. I play drums for my church choir. I will be 10 in a few days, June 13th. I'm going on to the 5th grade. No summer school this year. I will miss you. Mom helped me type this for you. Thank you, and I hope you are doing fine and enjoying teaching. Be good and be blessed, Gregory Salette. So, survival tip number 3. Take the time to savor every win. When my students came straggling into my room on the first day of school, I tried to kindly, but without smiling, introduce myself and then instruct them to find their desk and begin the student survey. My goal was simply to get to know my students. I'm not sure exactly what I expected their surveys to look like as I collected them, but let's just say I did not expect them to write Red Lobster for what is your favorite place in the world, or say that their favorite movies in 3rd grade are Scary Movie 3, Scary Movie 4, Saw, and Chucky. I'm still confused and somewhat amused by 2 students' answers to what is your nickname. Nehemiah wrote raise your hand, and LaTroy wrote big boy. Survival tip number 4, laugh. And oh, laugh I did at all of the ridiculous things my students wrote on their surveys. Little did I know, however, that this first assignment was going to be my first glimpse at the education gap in my classroom. When I got to Bakari's survey, I remember cocking my head to one side, squinting, and then finally flipping his paper upside down in an attempt to figure out what he wrote. In response to the question, do you have any brothers or sisters, Bakari wrote this. And in response to the question, what do you do after school, he scribbled this. My first instinct was to ask him if he were from another country and just felt like writing in his native tongue. But I caught myself in time, took a deep breath, and made a mental note to freak out to Josh later that evening about this poor child. My heart sank further when I started giving my students the test to determine what reading level they were on. The range was astounding. Bakari came in on a pre-K level. Ashton came in on a 1st grade level. Dee Dee came in around a 3rd grade level. And Jalen tested on day 1 at a 4th grade level. No joke, I had everything between pre-K and 4th grade reading levels in my 3rd grade classroom. And you're going to learn more about reading levels at Institute, but simply put, we're talking about the difference between reading Fat Cat Sat and Call of the Wild. But Josh didn't ask me to get up here to tell you horror stories from your first year of teaching. The reason Josh did ask me to get up here to come speak for a couple minutes was to tell you about my former student, Chris Dunson. So what follows is what I like to think of as the beginning of Chris's story. By no means is what I'm about to tell you Chris's entire story, because there is a lot I do not know about his life before walking into my classroom, and there is so much more in his life to come. This was Chris's 2nd time in 3rd grade. Chris had actually been retained twice thus far in his young life. He was also identified as SWD, or Student with Disabilities, meaning the school set much lower expectations for his future due to his limitations. He had almost completely internalized these disabilities and given up on himself. If all the adults around him were saying he couldn't be successful in school, how could he possibly believe that he could? I could tell that Chris was a sweet kid, but it was also very clear that school was not something that made his heart race. For the first month or so, Chris showed up tardy almost every day with little to no materials. He never brought in homework or reading log, and when I asked where they were or why he hadn't done his work, Chris would just look down in shame and remain silent. When I tested Chris's reading level, it broke my heart to see that he was reading at a D, which is late kindergarten level.